Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to this very special case here, and especially Joachim von Braun, Helen Elford, Cardinal Taxon, for putting this group together. I found the last day, yesterday already, incredibly enriching and also humbling with the knowledge, the diverse types of knowledge that are around here, enriched, in fact, by more than knowledge, by wisdom. And I'm talking today about biodiversity and biodiversity in social ecological research. I'm a natural scientist, so I'm putting this perspective into the dialogue. And what we understand in biodiversity research by biodiversity is the variety of life on Earth, the variety of species within species and among ecosystems. And we have known for quite many years that at a global scale, biodiversity is severely declining. Our measures are not very good. The kind of things we can measure are actually rather embarrassing. For example, this panel is showing some of the most widely used indicators. I'm just touching on the upper row. The Living Planet Index is measuring animals on Earth with a focus on mammals and birds. And we have, using the Living Planet Index, a decline of more than 60% now in the last 50 years. So basically, since I left I went to high school in my own life, we have lost more than 2/3 of the animals on Earth, and that's really threatening. Another measure up in the panel in the middle is the Red List Index. It measures how many species are threatened by extinction. The last global assessment by IPBES, the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, estimated that of the about 8 million species we have on Earth, 1 million is threatened by imminent extinction. And beyond that, our data are even poorer, so we don't know how many plant species there are. We don't even know how many tree species are there. So we measure simple things like the extent of natural forests, also with a severe decline. And now I want to focus a little bit on my own country and on Europe in general. What is the pattern we are seeing there? And that's a very special pattern. We are seeing declines, and that's data on birds, the best monitored group of species we have. And this brown line that is pointing downwards, that's the birds in agricultural landscapes. So on fields and meadows, and we have a decline of more than 30% in the last 25 years. And in other habitat types, like in forests, that's the blue line, the numbers are much more stable, and in the meantime, they're even increasing. So we have a biodiversity problem in Germany and in Europe in the agricultural, in the utilized landscape. So the way we conceptualize this, and I think many of you know this figure, it's coming from the IPBES conceptual framework, is that we have a mutual relationship between nature, maybe captured as biodiversity in ecosystems, at least in the natural sciences at the bottom, which is providing nature's benefits to people or ecosystem goods and services, increasing the quality of life or human well-being, with direct drivers influencing the system. In the center, that's where we can act, where we have the anthropogenic assets, the institutions and governance systems that can be shaped in a way so that the whole system is moving to the better. Now, with this decline in biodiversity, we have a severe decline in nature's contributions to people. In the regulating NCPs like pollination and seed dispersal and soil formation, in the material NCPs like the provisioning of food and feed and materials, and the non-material NCPs. And that's so far a little bit a meager point in the IPBES assessment that needs very much to be enriched. So it's about what we, all the intangible relationships with nature, the aesthetics, but also our well-being and our identity, a sense of place that is connected with nature. And again, I'm here referring to the IPBES global assessment. We have declines in all but 3 of these NCPs, And the only 3 NCPs that are increasing is the areas that are used for food and feed, for materials, and for energy, bioenergy. So we are managing ecosystems for the direct provisioning of humans at the cost of many other material ecosystem services or NCP, and at the cost of all regulating and all intangible NCPs. Just to give an impression that even individual species can have a very important role in ecosystems from our own research, I wanted to understand how birds influence seed dispersal, and especially in landscapes that are severely fragmented by agriculture. And that's a trumpeter hornbill. That's the largest frugivore in southern Africa. And we captured birds and put these little transmitters on the birds to see how they are moving through the landscape. And that's how they are, that should be how they are moving. If the movie is actually going on, we just practiced it and it worked. Well, the birds are moving through this fragmented landscape here in South Africa. It's an agricultural landscape with sugar cane plantations, and the birds are moving from fragment to fragment, and they are able to actually transport seeds between these fragments. And the birds are able to connect these fragments among each other, and they allow movements of seeds between these fragments, allowing the plants to adapt to these fragmented landscape. Now, what are the drivers of change? I'm working in Germany in a natural history museum, and when we ask visitors, they always say it's pollution, especially plastic pollution. But again, the IPBES assessment comes to a different ranking. They say that, and that's again consensus, that the #1 driver is human land use change, especially agriculture, like in tropical habitats, agriculture feeding itself into tropical forests, or, as I have shown you, the intensive agriculture we have in countries like Germany. Second reason for biodiversity loss is direct exploitation of species. That's especially important in marine systems, for example, catching fish. And then there is climate change, which is currently not a main driver of extinction, but will be very threatening in the future. And then there's pollution, and finally, exotic species. Now, what can we do to bend the curve, and can we imagine a future that is better for biodiversity? And in biodiversity research, we are very recently now in the position to have the same kind of global models that the climate community has. For climate change, we have these future scenarios that are put out there in the political and societal space, where then negotiations can take place and a decision can be made as to which of the futures one aspires to. And that was in the climate community when in Paris people decided to go for the 1.5-degree goal. And for biodiversity, we have the same. So you see in this figure on the left-hand side, the decline of biodiversity we have seen up to the present. That's this hatched line. And for the future, we have the choice, which kind of future we want to have. If we do business as usual, we follow these dark lines with a further decline of biodiversity, probably a halving of biodiversity by the year 2100. But among these future scenarios, there's also one, the yellow one, that is pointing upwards, where we can stop the decline of biodiversity by the year 2030, and where we can see an increase in biodiversity again. And what do we need to do if we want to follow this trajectory? There's 3 packages of action that we need to follow. One is conservation, larger and better managed protected areas, plus restoration of habitats. Second is to start at the supply side to have an sustainable productivity, but also an effective and productive productivity in the agricultural sector. And on the third side, we need to change, and that's now applying to countries like Germany, where we have a huge consumption and a huge food waste, to reduce food waste and to move from a more meat-based to a more plant-based diet. In fact, in countries like Germany, we would not be able to provide for the food we are eating within country. Although the climatic conditions are good, we need to import a lot of feed for the pork and pigs we are growing, and if we are not changing in Germany our diet, we are basically devastating biodiversity in other countries of the world. So what we did is, and I'm a member of the German Academy of Sciences, the Leopoldina, when we saw the severe decline of biodiversity in Germany, also the insect dieback that got very famous a couple of years ago, the Academy was asked, what is the scientific position to this, and how does science shape or evaluate these declines in biodiversity, and especially what should be done to transfer the decline. And the Academy, well, like academies do, 2 years to come up with this recommendation. And it is different to all the recommendations that have been published earlier. The first part is the same as in all recommendations. Obviously, agriculture needs to change and needs to be more biodiversity friendly. That's a given. But how does this, can this be achieved? In the end, the farmers are basically caught in a system which is very difficult for them to shape. And so the forces that need to change, they need to come out of politics and society as large. So it's not only a problem of agriculture, it's a holistic problem of the whole society and the way subsidies, for example, are turned out. So point 2 is, and that's very crucial, the European Common Agricultural Policy needs to be changed. Germany alone is receiving 7 billion of subsidies in agriculture. It's an incredible number, and nevertheless, we have a loss of farms and a loss of biodiversity. And there's good ideas how these subsidies can be repurposed so that biodiversity, climate, and so on can improve. Then we need joint landscape planning by all actors. We need also new technologies. Digitization, the breeding of more robust breeds is important in countries like Germany. And again, less food waste, more plant-based diets, and also changes in which food is traded and marketed. So coming back to this framework, what I think, and this is opening basically the door to the other presentations we have this day, they tried very hard to be more inclusive and not only have the scientific connotation of biodiversity or nature and human well-being, but also reflect different knowledge systems in this framework. So in addition to the scientific notion of biodiversity and ecosystem, there's Mother Earth and systems as life as different approaches. In addition to ecosystems, there's nature's gift, or in addition to human well-being, there's living in harmony with nature. So that was, in this international scientific process, a first step of reflecting different worldviews in a joint framework. And the next step, I think, went one step further, that is the IPBES values assessment that explicitly recognizes and harnesses different worldviews, knowledge systems, and values. So basically, if we have a landscape with a river and a forest and little settlements, we are looking at this from different lenses or with different light beams, seeing different things. So there's a possibility to frame this or approach this as living from the landscape, or living in this landscape, or living with this landscape, or living as part of this, system. And this is capturing to some degree this richness of worldviews and knowledge systems we have discussed yesterday, and we will definitely discuss today. And what I found interesting is it's also picking up one of the notions yesterday that these systems are standing beside each other. They are not integrated. They are giving specific positions, and they are not melted into some kind of joint bubble. So with this, I would like to end with a picture from the Natural History Museum in Senckenberg. If you're in Frankfurt, please visit. So that's a historical approach. It's actually a modern picture of the diversity of life on Earth from the geological, human, and animal and plant perspective. And I would like to thank you very much for your attention.